Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is a yet another dupe video, and today we're gonna dupe the newest Nomad palette, and this is the Verona Love Death palette. I gasped when I saw like the color story that was initially revealed, when they did not like reveal the entire palette, but the packaging and those shade. I'll put some pictures on the screen for you guys. Those shades, when it was revealed, oh my god, I lost my shit. I really did, because I felt like that is going to be like the perfect color story for me, and I knew that's going to be like an 18 pan eyeshadow palette. I felt like there'll be a lot of variations, a lot of variety, and a lot of like newness, and I still am super excited about that palette. The packaging is to another level. It's surrounding the theme of like Romeo and Juliet, love and death, you know, the love that blossomed between them and the tragedy of the death. I love the concept. I really love, and if you guys don't know, Nomad is a travel inspired makeup brand, and I have Nomad to try in this year, and I cannot wait to see what they have coming in the near future. But for now, I feel like when the entire palette was revealed, I felt like the pink and the red side, as you can see on the screen, it felt like there's a lot of repetitive shades, and they could have done a little better on like showing the variety as compared to that blue side, the cool tone side. I feel like the cool tone side has definitely a lot more variety to it as compared to the warm tone pinky tone side. Not complaining that I do not like it, because I really like it, and I feel like if there's like a sale going on, and if I've not finished the quota of 10 palettes, I'm definitely gonna buy this one, because this is definitely one of a beautiful color story. I feel like out of the pinks that they have on the left side, I felt like the first row, third shade, and the second row first shade is super similar. Similarly, I feel like the second row second shade and the third row first shade is super similar. I felt like there's like a lot of repetition going around there. Like if you pack one shade, you might get a little more depth, and if you blend it out, it'll sheer it out, you know. So I felt like that is like a repetitive thing that's happening on the left side. So that's the only complaint that I have, but otherwise the palette looks absolutely stunning. It's just beautiful. But I generally, whenever these like new launches come in the market, I generally try to recreate or like dupe the vibe of the palette with the existing palette that I have in my collection, and see if it will bring some kind of a variety to my collection or not. Because, you know, these shades have been done before. I have these shades over and over again. So let me just give you a little spoiler before we dive into the video. I'm going to do this eye look using the dupe shades that I'm going to show towards the end of the video. So stay tuned for that. But yes, if you do have these three palettes with you, this is the Gourmande Girls C'est palette, Simply Posh Cosmetics Genuine Gems palette, and Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette. I duped up all of the shades using these palette. I have one or two shades like from one palette, because these palettes do not have those grays, the two grays that are there in the palette. But if you're interested to see how I dupe this palette, then please keep on watching. Okay, without further ado, let's move on to duping the shades. I'm gonna first dupe the pink side, the pink and the red side, the warm tone side, and then I'll move on to the cool tone side. So let's begin. The first shade that I'm gonna dupe is from the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette, and this palette has a lot of shades. So, and there's a lot of pinks, right? So this shade, this shade, this shade, this shade, this shade, all of this can be duped for that palette. So let's begin. The first shade that I'm going to dupe is with this shade, which is Rome. So let's put that. It's a very like a pastel pink shade. It's good for like blending out the crease, and that's what I use in my crease. You'll see in just a minute. The second shade that I'm going to dupe is from the C'est Gourmande Girls palette, and the shade that dupes that is this shade, which is feminine. It might look like a white shade, but it is totally like a pink to a blue flip shade. So let's take that. Also, if you do not have that palette, and if you do have the Gourmande Girls Ethereal palette, there's a shade that is called Astrid, which will do like a very similar thing. So do keep that in mind. There you go. It's really pretty. You can see that blue flip coming through and that pink. Really pretty shade. Okay, the third shade in the palette is duped by this shade, which is Nectar. So let's take that. Now let's move on to the second row too. The next shade is duped by this shade, which is Warning. So let's take that. So let's swatch those two. This one and this one. And you can see the tone difference. I mean, you can definitely see. This is much, much lighter. This is more like a true Barbie pink. This has a lot of it's like a pinky red shade. Okay, next shade of the palette that I'm duping is this shade, which is called Rouge from the Cest L'Amour palette. This is like a true vibrant red shade. Ignore the swatches that are happening below. I just messed up a few shades, but this is the shade that I'm going to talk about. So this is Rouge. Now let's move on to the next shade. Okay, the next shade that I'm going to dupe is from this palette again, and this is the shade that I'm duping it with. It's called Boudoir. This is a little bit more of a satin shade. So I'm going to actually first swatch this and show you guys how this swatches. It definitely has that shimmer and the sheen that we are looking for. Just like that. But if you want like a little bit more sparkliness as it is showing in the Nomad palette, I'm going to take this shade, which is Rare from the Genuine Gems palette, and just tap it on top of it. Just to give that a little bit of shimmeriness through that shade. Just like that. It doesn't give like a whole lot of new dimension, but it definitely does give like something. The next shade in the palette is again duped by this Genuine Gems palette, and the shade that dupes it is called Ruby, this one. So let's take that. There you go. Now it's getting very, very similar in the pan. This is just a muted version of the red as compared to the Rouge shade that we swatched earlier. So there you go. Let's move on to the next shade. The next shade in the palette is again duped by the Genuine Gems palette, and this is the shade that I'm duping it with, and this is called Precious. So let's watch that. It's a pinky red shade with a lot of fiery sparkle to it. Can you see that? It's so pretty on the eyes. Really, really love it. This is the shade that I have all over my eyes today. Really pretty shade. And the last shade of the palette is duped. So for this, I'm swatching the shade Garnet from the Genuine Gems palette. This one. And that's this shade. So that is the pinky red side swatched for you guys. Really, really pretty. Like a warm tone pinky red side. Now let's move on to the cool tone side. I'm going to try and swatch it on this hand just so that we can compare both of the sides together. I'm going to try. My left hand is super, super weak as compared to the right hand. So let's try. Okay, now we're going to dive into the grays. For the grays, I dipped into the Colourpop That's Dope palette. And the first shade on the right side is duped by this shade, which is Boa. I'm already failing at it. Oh my God. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Okay. So that's the shade Boa from the Colourpop That's Dope palette. That dupes the first shade in the palette. The second shade in the palette is duped by the Simply Posh Genuine Gems palette, and the shade is called Clarity, this one. It's like a green shade with a lot of golden sparkles running throughout it. So let's watch that. God, this finger. We have something. That's the second shade. Can you see that? How beautiful that shade is? It's that green to that gold flip shade. Really, really pretty. The next shade is a deeper gray shade, which is also duped by the That's Dope palette, and I'm duping it with this shade, which is called Rock Steady, this one. So let's swatch that. Oh my God, terrible swatch. Okay. That's the third shade. Now let's move on to the next row. Okay, the next row is like a blue duochrome shade. I felt like the shade from the Ethereal palette, which is Nova, this one would be a very, very good dupe to it. It's like a blue to a purple flip shade. So let's watch that. There you go. Really pretty, really vibrant. Really love that. Now the next shade in the palette is duped by the Gourmande Girls C'est palette, and the shade is called Noir. Also, if you have the Blend Bunny Primal palette, you have the shade, the black shade, Nocturnal. So let's watch that. Oh, look at that black, so pretty. Okay, there you go. The next shade in the palette is also from the Blend Bunny Primal palette, and the shade that is duping it is called Ink, this blue, deep dark blue shade. So let's watch that. There you go. Oh, it almost looks like a black, but it is a navy blue shade. Really, really pretty shade. Okay, the next shade in the palette is it's duped from the C'est palette, and this is the shade that is duping up with this one, and this is called Suore. Okay, can you hear the birds chirping? So let's watch that. That with that blue would be so beautiful. It's like a mauve shade. I've used this like a few times from this palette, and it's very, very pretty. There you go. See how beautiful that shade is? It has that purpley mauvey tone to it. Really pretty. Okay, the next shade in the palette, it's definitely a multichrome shade, which I have to dip into some other palette, and I'm going to take Pretty Sphere Face Electrified, and I feel like that is a good representation of that shade. So let me show you that. Can you see that? It looks like a purple, and even in the picture, I'll pop some, I'm sure I'm popping it somewhere on the screen. It looks like a purple, but it shifts to a lot of different shades. Can you see that? So I want to swatch this. Electrified, again from Pretty Sphere Face. So let's watch that. Very, very sparkly shade. Can you see that? And very dimensional. Now the last shade in the palette is duped by the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette, and I'm duping it with this shade, which is Lethal. So let's watch that. It's a deepened, winey, purpley based shade. Very, very deep. Really, really pretty. So that is the cool tone side swatched for you guys. And this is the entire palette in front of you. I really hope that these comparisons are useful to you. I'm also gonna pop a picture on the screen for you guys. In the outside lighting, I did swatch the entire palette together so that you can see all the shifts, the dimension, all the shiftiness that I dupe this palette from. Now, once you've seen all these swatches, let's move on to the eye look. I'm gonna first take this shade, which is Rome from the Blend Bunny Primal palette, and apply that all across my crease. And this is gonna be like my base shade. I'm going to take this shade, which is Nectar, and I'm going to focus that on the inner third of my crease, just like that. Just like that. Now let's move on to a few reds. Now I'm going to first take this shade, which is Rouge from the Gourmande Girls C'est palette. I'm going to take that with like a flat but fluffy brush. And I'm going to first concentrate that on the outer of my eyelid and then blend it with that pink. It's super, super pigmented shade. Oh my god, look at the pigmentation. Not gonna worry about the blending. I'm just gonna take the same shade on my outer corners of the lower lash line, just to melt everything together. I'm gonna dip into this shade Noir, and I'm gonna just focus that on the outer corners. I'm also going to take that black on the outer corners of the lower lash line. Just like that. Just to get like a smoky effect. I'm going to focus the same thing on the other eye too. I'm going back into that red. Just intensifying the red just because I don't want to lose it. I'm going to take this shade Feminine on my inner corners. Just like that. Now, let's move on. I'm just going to apply a little bit of glitter glue. I'm going to take this shade, which is Precious. And this is the Simply Posh Cosmetics Genuine Gems palette. This one. And I'm going to apply that right there. It's such a sparkly shade. I'm going to take this shade Garnet from the Simply Posh palette. I'm going to place that in the inner corner, but I'm just going to sweep it right on top of it. Right there. Like the inner third of my eyelid, just to give it a little more lightness. And I feel like that would be so beautiful with that red. Oh, I'm loving that. Okay, I'm going to finish off this eye with some liner and mascara and I'll get right back. And that is my final eye look. Oh my god, I love this fiery eye look, like with that red smoky eye. I am absolutely a big fan of this color story. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this dupe video and I was a little bit of helpful. If you did have these palettes already in your collection, you can make a conscious decision whether you need that palette or not. But otherwise, the color story, the theming, the packaging, everything of that Nomad palette looks absolutely wonderful. I personally, you know that I am like very restricted to the 10 palette count this year. So I'm going to make a very conscious decision of whether I'm going to purchase this palette or not. And I'm going to wait for like a sale or something because it's not like a limited edition palette by any means. So we'll make that decision a little later. But that's all for today, guys. I really hope that this video was helpful for you guys. And if you did like it, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.